And we are live. Ding dong, the mask mandates are gone. Jim responds to Twitter, and the big question of the day is the Biden administration returning to energy sanity? We're going to be talking about this and more on episode 342 of the In the Tank podcast. All right, welcome to the In the Tank podcast. As always, I'm your host, Donald Kendall. Joining me today, I've got Jim Lakely, VP, and I was going to say something funny at the Heartland Institute. How are you today, good sir?
You say something funny, that would be a first. So, oh boy, I'm sorry. I was in kind of a bad mood today, and then I heard the breaking news that CNN Plus has already been canceled less than a month into its debut. CNN spent, I think, already something like $200 million marketing and promoting that thing, and then Discovery Networks is just pulling the plug. So that made my day. I'm in a much better mood.
Yeah, that was so funny. We got to talk about that a little bit. But also joining us, we have Chris Talgo, senior editor at the Heartland Institute. How are you today, good sir?
Doing good. And like I told Jim, I would highly recommend that he and every listener sign up for Fox Nation. Great content.
Oh, they didn't shut down after 3 weeks, did they?
No. Last time I heard, their base is just booming.
And returning to the show, Isaac Orr, policy fellow at the Center of the American Experiment. How are you today, good sir?
I'm good, thanks.
Fantastic. Man, a few words, this Isaac Orr,
Sure.
Very soft-spoken. Back from his awesome adventure at the gas station convention. How was that?
It was pretty great. Not a lot of people who were opposed to our worldview there, believe it or not. Nice. So, it was pretty fun.
Awesome. So we got a lot of topics to get into here, but before we do, I do want to put out a message to all those audio-only listeners that are catching our show on a Friday, probably, that you could join the show, listen to it, hear it, watch it a day earlier on Thursdays at noon Central Time on Facebook, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, pretty much anywhere. Rumble. If you look hard enough, you will find us. You can join the conversation live. You can throw your comments and questions in the little chat there, and maybe we'll respond to your comments. Maybe we'll address your questions live on the show. And also, for those people that are watching this on YouTube, on the Heartland channel, make sure to also subscribe to our In the Tank podcast channel. It's a separate channel on YouTube that we created after YouTube threatened to nuke our account from space because of some of the things that we said. So in an effort to make sure that we don't self-censor ourselves, we created a separate channel on YouTube for this show. So help support us, support free speech, and subscribe to that specific channel and make sure you don't miss an episode. So I had some opening chit-chat things I wanted to get to, but just as we were preparing here, I saw news that Jim already referenced it. CNN Plus has shut down after a whole 3 weeks of existence. There was a couple of stories that had come out after it became live, where they immediately slashed the price to get more subscribers, and people were saying, "Oh, that's signaling that they're having trouble getting more subscribers to this." I didn't really read into it too much. I thought maybe it was just a marketing thing. So then when news came across that they're shutting down at the end of the month. This might be the funniest story of the year so far. Chris, what do you think about this?
In some ways, I almost feel sorry for the executives because this is just so embarrassing. But then the other side of me says, hallelujah, because they deserve it. CNN is fake news, has been fake news for so long. Obviously, the people just are sick and tired of the fake news. So, I think overall it's a good thing.
How about you, Isaac? I don't know if you have so much malice towards CNN as the rest of us here. What are your thoughts about this?
I just think it's wild that they thought hey, our ratings are already low. Let's add more content. That's the problem. We need more poop for people to consume.
Jim, do the people that did subscribe, did they get a refund? I mean, you were probably subscribing for like a year.
Yeah, but it was only $4. So like,
yeah, and there's only about there's only about 1,000 of them, so they could probably handle that with an intern in an afternoon. But look, CNN's ratings are the worst. Look, everybody who has cable, and that's decreasing all the time anyway. If you have cable, it's I think impossible to get cable without CNN. So you pay for cable, CNN comes with it. They're the first cable news network, historic. When it was the first of its kind at that time. But the idea that the lowest rated news network, and it's because they have shred their credibility, that people are not watching for free in their cable packages. They have hundreds of thousands of viewers, while Fox News would have millions of viewers. I mean, It's like it's as if they don't exist. They actually only exist. Most people, I haven't watched CNN, I don't know, a decade or more, and I don't have cable now anymore anyway. But the only time I would ever see anything from CNN, it'd be clips that a Fox News host like Tucker Carlson might play, or I'll see someone making fun of CNN on a Twitter clip or something like that. But that's it. So the idea that the lowest rated cable network would spend $300 million, I think it was, to market an app that people would pay extra to watch, even more stuff that nobody's watching for free. CNN, as people might know, was just, they have a new owner now. They just got bought out. The owner, I forget his name, forgive me, but he was on CNBC about a month or two ago, and they asked him, so, well, what do you want to do with CNN? He goes, well, I think it'd be great if they got back to real journalism again. So he didn't have much respect for it. And so pretty much the first thing he does when he gets in, it's like, we've spent what on this thing? Are you serious? No, pulling the plug right now. No. And what's really hilarious is that the CNN, their plan was to spend $1 billion on this app over the next several years, and they anticipated having 15 million subscribers to their app within like 4 years. And they had about 10,000 paying subscribers after a month. I mean, there are literally hundreds of thousands of YouTube channels that have more consistent audience than CNN Plus did. And they didn't spend $300 million trying to get people to sign up.
No. Going back to objective journalism and all that is not going to get subscribers to them. What they have to do is lean into like the reality TV show stuff. Like if I were to be able to watch a show with Brian Stelter and Anderson Cooper and all of that, like doing Survivor on some island or something like that.
Yeah, or like noodling for catfish in Alabama. I would watch that. That would be great.
Yeah, like the most dangerous game, or what's that one where they're like fishing for tuna or something like that, and like the Arctic Ocean
catch or something.
Yeah, deadliest catch.
I would love to see Chris Cuomo come back and compete against some of them too.
Why don't they do like a CNN Hunger Games? Like they just need to think about this
I would tune in.
Right. We need to reach out to the new owners of CNN and be like, guys, we have some really great ideas.
Need fresh ideas.
I think retiree CNN Plus is a little premature. I think you just need to revamp the business model a little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think if they just pour in another $300 million, they'll really turn the corner. And they should start with they should bring back Anchor Bro, Chris Cuomo, and do a version of The Biggest Loser where he trains Brian Stelter and gets his weight down.
There you go. I think they just need to bring us in. This is the power of think tanks,
What was that show from like the 90s that had like the claymation boxing?
Celebrity Deathmatch.
Celebrity Deathmatch. I think that would be great if they had some kind of version of that on CNN Plus.
Or just celebrity boxing, I would love to see
the Cuomo brothers actually fighting each other.
Please,
that would be
this Jeff Toobin.
Oh God!
I mean, like, it's
no hitting below the hitting below the belt.
Below the belt for Mr. Toobin there. Yeah.
Well, Mr. Toobin, pull this one out.
Oh my God! All right. So we have Isaac Orr on the show for two reasons: one, to crack jokes like that, and two, because of his energy expertise. And I want to dedicate. I want to dedicate most of the episode to energy topics. We got a bunch of stuff to get into, but before we do, we need to address something that happened last episode. So last week, Jim went on one of his patented Jim rants about the return of masks in Philadelphia, I think. I don't remember.
Yeah, that's right.
And the potential return of them in other cities and all of that. And we sectioned out a segment of the show, and we shared it on Twitter. And not only that, we promoted the post on Twitter to see what the reaction would be. And it went exactly how you would expect it to go. So that night, my Twitter starts buzzing like crazy with a ton of notifications. Throughout the night, the post received dozens of loving responses filled with logical, thoughtful comments that added to the dialogue on this very important issue. Nah, I'm just kidding. It was a cesspool of some of the most hate-filled and vile comments you could possibly imagine. And it's easy to brush it off and just ignore it because, most of those comments were probably left by children, so who cares? But there was a couple of reoccurring things that came up that I thought that we should address. So, number one, we're the Heartland Institute, not the Fartland Institute. And that's basically all I have to say. Jim, what are your thoughts?
Okay, so I will admit that when I was still at Heartland, there were times where I would just write a big old F over, like,
that's right.
Guilty.
Lovingly, though. Lovingly.
I mean, sure.
Jim, you were the one that kind of spearheaded this little promotion. What were your
Yeah, well, I mean, we got a lot of negative reactions. All I did was say, look, people are sick of the mask mandates, and it turns out I was right. I mean, look, you've seen people cheering on airplanes all across the country because the mask mandate was gone, and that there was no science behind it. And then we got all these trolls in here with insults against me and the Heartland Institute. Frankly, I thought you went a little overboard with that, Isaac. I know you have a lot of bot accounts, and you like to troll me, but
It is my favorite activity.
It is absolutely your favorite activity.
Because you're so easy.
Only 80% of those were Isaac.
Yeah. Yeah.
Only 80%.
Yeah, and so we had, let's say, someone said more like Fartland. Am I right? That's pretty funny.
For April Fool's next year, you guys should announce that you're changing the name of the institution.
That's
the Fartland Institute for Gastrointestinal Studies.
Ooh, there you go. Yeah, but so then there's the string of people who say that I don't care about people with disabilities, that I want people to die, that
you got called an ableist multiple times.
Mm-hmm. Yes, here we go. Lots of hashtag disabled folks disagree with your ableism.
They put hashtag disabled folks. Is that serious?
No, disabled. The word disabled was hashtagged. And then there was this part, in the clip, we're not playing it. You can just watch last week's pod, but I mentioned that at this point, forcing people to keep masks on in certain places, specifically like airplanes. And I even mentioned that I'm going to be going on a flight next for a little vacation in May. And I dreaded getting on a plane and having to wear a mask. And, when you have to wear it on a plane, but people are in bars and restaurants and sporting events. You all saw the Super Bowl where everybody was maskless in California, where it was supposed to still be mandatory. And so this whole thing is silly, but I made the point that at this point, it's now cruel. It's cruel to make people put face diapers on and restrict their breathing on airplanes or anywhere else that they have, like doctor's offices too, for that matter. And then I said that the cruelty is the point. And then somebody came in and said that I stole that line. So I did a little, digging around. Apparently, some writer for The Atlantic had written a book or an article that used that term. And I supposedly read that and then used it for myself or something.
I know you subscribe to Atlantic.
Yeah.
Magazine.
Oh, yeah. I would read that rag.
Littered across your desk are just numerous copies.
Yeah. And so the idea that, I read The Atlantic, that's a worthwhile magazine, that I'm going to get really good information and perspective on life reading The Atlantic magazine is absurd. But, we'll probably do more promotion tweets like this of clips of the show and just see how they go.
Can I address some of the points? Because truthfully, there was a couple of reoccurring things that came up.
All right.
One was this idea that, you don't care about people that are susceptible and old people and disabled people and all of that stuff. You're putting them in danger by being so selfishly adherent to your concepts of freedom. That was kind of the reoccurring thing. And to that, my response is, are you going to be consistent about this? Are you going to so rabidly demand mask mandates come any flu season? Because those same populations are susceptible to the flu as well. The flu has a mortality rate as well. So is it just this? So that's kind of one thing. And then also the one concept that I always rail against is the idea of only looking at one side of the ledger. The concept of if it saves one life, then everything on the other side of the ledger is just meaningless and we won't pay attention to it. As if there's no mal effects to requiring people to wear masks all the time. Now, admittedly, I bring up this argument when the conversation is based around school and children having to wear masks constantly at school. and the people that are, the kids that are missing out on this unencumbered social interactions, as well as seeing people speak, which is really important for really young children and their development of their, speech patterns and all of that stuff. And just like in a general societal interaction way, having people unnecessarily masked comes with its detriments. So like when I'm out at a store and I'm not wearing a mask because they're not mandated around here anymore, I avoid contact with people wearing masks. And not to be a jerk or anything like that, just because to me they are signaling that they are uncomfortable in public. And I don't want to add to their discomfort by interacting with them unnecessarily. So like this idea that it will only save lives and there's no other male effects, I think is juvenile. Just like all of those people that responded to that thing on Twitter.
So one of the things I've noticed, because, I do watch MSNBC and CNN just to see like, what the other side is like, saying and how they're like framing these things. And what I've noticed is a lot of the anchors on CNN and MSNBC and, like just leftists in general are first of all, they're neurotic, because we know for a fact that masks don't work, and they are doubling, tripling down on masks, despite, a plethora of studies that have come out over the past 2 years saying they just don't work. They don't do anything. But I've also seen that they are trying to present this as, their virtue signaling. And what they were trying to do is say, okay, fine, we're going to have like a bifurcated society in which, the people that care, the people that have hearts are going to wear masks and all the other people don't. And on MSNBC last night, they were calling for segregation on planes and trains and and all sorts of places. You're going to have even in restaurants, you're going to have a mask area and then a non-mask area, and they want to do this in perpetuity. So it just shows they cannot let go of the virtue signaling that they have done for the past 2 years, and they also just can't let go of the pandemic. It's over, but they refuse to let it be over.
Yeah, and Jim, a development since that episode that should please you, especially because you're railing against the mask mandates on planes. Seems like that's been struck down. Do you want to elaborate a little bit?
Oh yeah, a Trump judge in Florida, of all places, boy, that's kind of perfect, isn't it? Struck down, ruled that the CDC does not have the authority, was not granted the authority to impose a mask mandate on public transportation across the United States, and that, frankly, if Biden wants this to happen, if the Democrats who control Congress want this to happen, it's a very simple solution. You pass a law. You pass a bill, gets through both houses, and President Biden signs it, and then forevermore, the CDC has the authority to impose mask mandates whenever it freaking feels like it. But that's not the way our system works, see? Because they don't have the authority to do that, so they're not doing it. And this administration, I thought the court did them a favor. I think they want the mask mandate gone, or at least I thought this 2 days ago. This is really hard to keep track of all this stuff because they keep changing their mind. Literally, yesterday I saw at 1:00 p.m. in the briefing, Jen Psaki said that the administration is going to appeal this decision, but they're going to keep the mask mandates disappearance in place. So they're not going to impose the mask mandate again, or ask for a stay, I should say, of the decision. They're going to appeal it. 2:00, an hour later, the president says to reporters that if you're on a plane, if you want to wear a mask, that's up to the personal choice. You can do whatever you want. And then at 3:00, they had to again say that no, we're suing. We want to impose this because the CDC wants us to do that because they want them on the planes. As Chris said, this is over. This is not coming back. I don't think people are going to stand for it. We saw, and we have a clip here. There was the joy. I kind of joked that. I haven't seen this much spontaneous joy since the Berlin Wall fell. I mean, people just like went crazy. Applause on planes, hundreds of planes, thousands of planes all across the country as captains gleefully gave them the news that you don't have to have the face diaper on anymore, that, you're free to breathe freely and live like a normal human being and not live in a state of constant fear and scolding. Stewardesses dancing down the aisle, taking their masks off. They couldn't believe it. I saw one clip where a flight attendant cried while she was announcing to the people on the plane that the mask mandate is over and you can take them off. And she says, "I've had this on my face for 2 years," as she cried. These, and so for the again,
why didn't she take it off when she was not working?
That's a good question. I'm sure she did. but she's on the plane working full time with that mask on, and it can be soul crushing. You lose your humanity, and you live in a constant state of compliance and a constant state of fear. You don't feel like I'm sorry, I don't care what these people on Twitter said. You don't really feel like a full human being living your life the way you wish if you are forced to put a mask over your face, covering up 3/4 of your face. It's just not necessary. And again, there's a great story. We'll put it in the show notes. I don't think it was included in the show notes right now, at City Journal, by John Tierney, who used to be with the New York Times. It's a reasonable person who left there and with the New York Times. But he has a chart where he shows that there's a chart showing what the mask mandate states versus the no mandate states, and the daily new cases per 100,000 residents in each of those two categories. There was no difference at all. So there was never any scientific justification for the imposition of mask mandates. It was about control. And again, it was to keep people afraid. It was to keep people afraid of their fellow man. It was to make them think that, again, we've been saying this for 2 years. There was this default assumption that every human being you may interact with is a danger to you, is a walking sack of disease who may at any minute burst upon you and make you sick and kill grandma or kill you right there on the spot. The powers that be, the deep state, the people who are ruling elite in this country, the ruling class, they like you to be afraid. They like you to live in fear, and they like you to be compliant. The ending of this mask mandate, which I don't think is ever going to come back, is a great blow for freedom. And it's just proven by how excited and happy people are who have to deal with this every day.
So, Donnie, one of the things that I found really interesting about this was 21 states sued to have the mask mandate on airplanes and other interstate travel, buses and trains removed. And obviously the court agreed with them and issued an injunction. I remember many times during the Trump administration when states sued to try to prevent, Trump executive orders and, federal departments from doing things, and that was constantly celebrated. That was celebrated as the courts are there to try to determine these things. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander, first off, and second of all, the CDC is using a 1944 law passed obviously during World War II to implement their mask mandate. The CDC has gone so far over the letter of the law that was, used to initiate this mask mandate. It's 2 years into it. They never had a comment period. This it's just ridiculous that they are still trying to use this, World War II era law to implement a mask mandate in 2022. Like Jim said, Congress, if they actually, did their duty, they would pass a law to say in 2020, we're going to mandate masks for COVID-19. They never did that because they knew that was an unpopular position to take. So what happened? We had the CDC use their vague, powers to institute this 2-year-long mask mandate. And finally, the system has worked. And we had states sue to say, hey, the federal government does not have the power to do this. And a judge appointed by Donald Trump, that was part of what he said he would do. He would appoint judges who were constitutional originalists. And she, took an originalist and a textualist viewpoint on this and said, yeah, of course they can't do this. I don't understand why there's all this, backlash to this. Because once again, throughout the Trump administration, when states sued to prevent, any sort of program that they didn't agree with, that was constantly celebrated.
Yeah, I mean, to get back to a point that Donnie had made earlier, and now he's back after a little bit of technical difficulties, but that these things have cost. The idea that's like, hey, it's no big deal, just put the mask on your face, you're keeping me safe. I don't know if we'll play the clip, probably not, because we're having enough technical challenges, but there was a doctor on MSNBC who said, you know what you should do? You should bring extra masks with you on the plane. And when you sit down, you should ask the people in your row, I would like you to wear this mask, please, to keep me safe. My grandmother is immunocompromised, or my child at home, is at risk. So I would really like you to wear this mask. In all honesty, you should just politely take that mask from them and use it as a napkin and throw it away. That's what I would do if somebody handed me a mask like that, because you're just not doing it. There's no science for it. Look, I'm only going to wipe it on my face, not going to wipe it anywhere else.
It was like on an oxygen tank, like a sweet little old lady who just said, I'm very immunocompromised, sir. Would you please mind wearing this? You would tell somebody's grandma on oxygen, you would take the mask and use it as a napkin.
Yeah.
How dare you?
Wow. Yes, right.
Whoa.
Or maybe a coaster for my beer.
But all we'd have to
spicy take right there.
All we need to tell her is, excuse me, ma'am, you are aware that the mask does not prevent the transmission of COVID-19 whatsoever. So if you want to wear one,
this is an N95 mask.
Oh.
All right, what if she handed you a scuba mask with a tank, and then so you can sit next to her on the plane? That's where we're going with this. Look,
what if you got to smoke?
She doesn't have the ability. She doesn't have the ability to mandate that we wear something on our face because she's neurotic.
She's asking you.
Well, and we have the freedom.
She's a sweet little old lady.
But we have the freedom to say no.
You do have the freedom.
I see you do it again. You're gone. Don't do it. You're
So clearly the podcast has gone off the rails since
it has
dropped out for the few minutes. So I'm gonna not pretend like I know what's going on and try to transition to the next topic.
No. Look, just give me one more point on this topic, because I got one of my notes. Because you said that there's people do not think at all about the trade-offs. We've had an enormous spike in childhood depression. We've had, in fact, I just saw right here, a new study from the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism finds that alcohol-related deaths in 2020 were so high for 16 to 64-year-olds that those deaths from alcohol exceeded the number of deaths in that age group from COVID-19. These things, the depression, the ability to control, to keep us afraid, to keep us locked down, these had severe psychological and other impacts on the health of and just the psyche of the American people. And we need to start talking about that a lot more, and we need to hold the people accountable who implemented these unscientific, unnecessary, and ineffective policies to account.
But is it their fault that those other folks can't handle their liquor?
Donnie, one last point on this. So Paul Krugman tweeted out that he thinks that there's going to be a rash of violence against people who wear masks perpetrated by people who don't wear masks. I can tell you, this is anecdotally, that I have not experienced one time in the past 2+ years where a unmasked person went up to a masked person and said, "Take that mask off. How dare you wear that mask?" But I've seen a whole bunch of times where a masked person has gone up to an unmasked person and said, "Put a mask on. Why aren't you wearing a mask? Blah, 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 blah." This is a one-way street. So for Krugman and other people, MSNBC and CNN, to say, "Oh, this is gonna put people in jeopardy who are just good people who want to wear their mask," not at all. No one, I've never heard of a story where someone said, "Take the mask off." It's always the people who say, "Put the mask on."
Yeah, no, that is a good point. And I will say that my internet is not being good today. So if I have to jump on my phone and my audio quality goes down, apologies in advance. But I do want to take the time, while my internet connection seems fine and stable, to transition to the thing that I wanted to be the core of this episode, which is energy policy. So, we've spent a ton of time in the past year plus talking about all the terrible energy policies enacted by Joe Biden, from stifling gas and oil development domestically to advocating for expanded solar and wind power, shutting down pipelines, promoting more electric vehicles, all of this type of stuff, things that'll make energy more expensive and force us into a position of weakness on multiple fronts. And all of this is expected. Joe Biden has campaigned on phasing out oil and gas. In fact, I'm pretty sure he promised to end oil and gas at one point during his campaign. And when he got into office, he immediately started enacting policies to move forward on just that. So, he's been doing all of the stuff that I just listed off. But then the last couple of months happened. The policies that he's enacted started to finally have an effect. And those effects were admittedly greatly exacerbated by the Russia-Ukraine war. Gas prices shot up. Energy prices rose.
I disagree with that. Greatly exacerbated. Disagree.
Okay. Resulting in the cost of everything to skyrocket. But most importantly, the Biden administration, his poll numbers plummeted. So now some interesting stories have come across my desk that I'm very curious to get Isaac's take on specifically, but all of your guys' takes on. That seem like he's almost reversing course a little bit. So, Isaac, the first story that I want to bring up, ABC News story. Infuriating climate activists, Biden expands oil drilling on public land. So the article starts off, in a move that could help temper high gasoline prices, President Joe Biden is bringing back leases for oil and gas drilling on federal land. But the reversal of a 2020 campaign promise has angered climate activists ahead of midterms that will determine Biden's ability to get his agenda through Congress. The administration was set to start selling leases for drilling on public lands, putting 144,000 acres of lands up for lease in 9 states as soon as Monday. As Biden faces massive pressure to boost oil production in the U.S. amid soaring prices, partly from the war in Ukraine. There you go, partly, Chris. And
Not greatly.
what Biden calls Putin's price hike. The Interior Department announced the move on Friday afternoon, heading into the holiday weekend. So, Isaac, this is my first story. I've got a couple here, but is this signaling a return to energy sanity? What do you think?
Yes and no, right? So the administration is claiming that they're only doing this because the courts have ordered them to do it. From I think it was June 2021 lawsuit from Jeff Landry, who was a speaker at the America First Energy conference that Heartland sponsored many moons ago at this point. So yeah, the Biden administration did have some oil and gas leases that they allowed to go through, but it was much smaller than what was originally proposed. Secretary Holland said that she cut the amount of acreage up for, lease by about 80%, and they also increased the royalties. So, I think that this is really just emblematic of the administration's policies on virtually everything. Like, I don't think that this administration cares whether the policies that they're advocating actually do things to fix the problem. They just want to look like they're trying to fix the problem, right? Like,
Yeah,
that's why the administration is talking about, oh, well, we're going to release oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve in order to bring down prices. And it's just like, well, really, you're just making us more vulnerable in the future because we don't have those resources available later if we actually need them for an emergency, right? So somebody said that that's the equivalent of spending down your bank account instead of getting a job. And it's, but it's true, right? That's exactly what's happening here. So I do think that the administration is maybe just being bludgeoned by the bad polling that says, what was it, like 68% of Americans think that the Biden administration is doing a poor job of handling gas prices. So I think that this is like even starting to penetrate their skulls. So I do think that there's a little bit of a return to sanity, but they're trying to have it both ways by saying that the court is ordering them to do this to give them cover with their like crazy climate base.
Well, Chris, when I brought up this topic to you, when we were talking about potential topics to talk about on this week, you immediately like cut through this idea that this idea that Biden is returning to sanity. You're like, no, it's definitely not. I'll look into it a little bit. But then you sent around just this morning, because you kind of had all the op-ed editing and all of that stuff in our organization. You sent around a finished piece. And now this hasn't been published anywhere, but it is authored by our Tim Benson. And I think one of the paragraphs kind of cuts right to it. And then I want to get your reaction here. He says this is a sneak peek at this unpublished op-ed, by the way. The point is to appear like he is trying to increase production while doing all this in his power to discourage it. The point is when some dude goes, hey, man, why is gas so expensive? So expensive that I had to sell my least favorite child so I could get money to afford filling up the tank. Biden can say between bites of his spoon-fed applesauce, hey, Jack, don't look at me. We've opened up new drilling space on federal land. Go ask the greedy oil companies. So, I mean, like...
Listen, Jack, I got 2 ice cream cones that beg to differ.
But I mean, do you think that this is it? It's just so that he can throw off the scent that the real culprit behind these skyrocketing gas and oil prices is him, and now he can say, no, I'm doing everything in my power to lower them. It's these greedy oil companies. That's got to be it, right?
I absolutely think that that's what's happening here. I think the Putin's price spike propaganda has been an abysmal failure. Americans across the board blame Biden for the exorbitant prices at the pump. So Biden's between a rock and a hard place. What does he do? He says, okay, fine, we'll open up some federal lands for drilling. But like Isaac said, first of all, they increased the royalties 50% for the first time in a century, 100 years. And they only opened up, from what I've seen, 2% of those available lands. So not only is this just going to be another drop in the bucket, but also those costs are going to be passed on to the consumer. So this is not going to decrease the cost of gasoline and energy across the board, because if the royalties are 50% more, and they're only allowing 2% of the federal lands to have drilling permits accessed. How is this going to do anything? It's not. And also, one of the major problems, and I'm sure Isaac, can expand on this, is that even if the oil companies can get the oil and natural gas out of the ground, the infrastructure that's needed to transport it, whether it's in a pipeline or other ways, is not happening. So even if they do get it out of the ground, they're going to be sitting on it. So the administration, is stifling oil and natural gas production because they're kowtowing to the green energy flank. And here they are, stuck between a rock and a hard place. So yeah, they're going to say that they're, trying to do something, because we're getting closer to the midterms, and the polling is just, showing that the American people are, just beyond sick and tired of the excuses. Mm-hmm. But I doubt that it's going to have a large effect, and I doubt it's going to have a large effect before the election, because it's going to take weeks, months to get these rigs up and going. And once again, there's not the infrastructure in place to get it to market.
Yeah, and I think Isaac's right about like this being a response to just being bludgeoned by these bad poll numbers. In the same article, it says a recent ABC News Ipsos poll found Americans are more likely to place a great deal or a good amount of the blame for the price increases on the Democratic Party policies, 52%, and Biden, 51%. A strong majority of Americans, 68%, also disapproves of the way Biden is handling gas prices. But Jim, I'm going to go to you on this one. Doesn't it also kind of work in the opposite? Because also in this article, it makes a big point of climate groups, environmentalist groups, being really upset over Biden's latest move here. So on one hand, he's trying to appeal to middle America. I'm doing all I can to help you lower gas prices. In reality, we know he's not. Right. But he's also simultaneously signaling to his base, the very environmentalists, environmental alarmist activist types, that he doesn't care about climate change or any of this. So on net, do you think this is going to work in his benefit or against him?
Oh, but Joe Biden has a great track record of having things work in his benefit and being really savvy politically. So yes, this will absolutely work. But no, this is just like, you mentioned how, he says, well, the courts are making us do it. So, go ahead and open up drilling again. I guess we have to do it. So that's what he tells his environmental left. The vast majority of the American people want lower gas prices. They want American energy production. They want, American energy independence, which is what we had before Joe Biden became president, and we just threw all that away. And so he may think he can fool both sides of that, of that issue. He's not going to. The vast majority of the people in the country are not extreme leftists, but the extreme leftists are the ones that support, they're the base of the party, both financially and electorally. The rest of the country doesn't believe in that stuff. They want lower gas prices. They want lower everything. Energy is as we say a lot on this podcast, is the master resource. Inflation costs. If energy costs go up, that's one of the pressures on inflation among many others, but it's one of the most important ones and most immediate ones, because those costs have to be passed on to the consumer. If it costs more to ship something somewhere, put it in a truck and take it somewhere, it's all those costs are going to go down to everybody at the other end, which is you and me, the consumer. But this is kind of like the biggest catastrophe policy wise this country and frankly the world has ever done is the idea that we can just stop the economy and then we can just start it up again, and everything
Right.
will be fine. We've learned very much the hard way that is not how things work. That it is not possible to do that. When you turn 2 weeks to stop the spread into 2 years of various versions of lockdowns and economic regression, you can't get that stuff going. You can't get it rolled up again. And one of the things even if we were going to have drilling, tomorrow, and then, okay, let's have the Keystone XL pipeline, and let's put in this pipeline over here, and let's do all of this. It takes years for that kind of stuff to happen. It took Donald Trump 4 years to get the momentum in which we finally, near the end of his term, got true American energy independence. Now we have, and then as soon as Biden got into office, he put a stop to all of it. All of it ends. He said on the campaign trail, no more drilling ever anywhere with no more big oil. They're going to stop their drilling. This guy is an idiot and a radical, and you cannot now decide and blame the oil companies because you put a complete stop to all the momentum that we took 4 years getting to get to American independence. And so the idea that the suffering at the pump is going to end with one or two little tweaks in policy and a pretend, hey, go drill on that land that doesn't have any oil on it. And then, I'll just tell America, well, I'm doing my best. No one's going to buy it. And we're not going to have the energy we need because this president is not serious about it. This administration is not serious about it. We're not going to get a serious America First energy policy again until at least 2024.
Yeah,
Can't do much about that. It's Putin's fault.
That's right.
Did you guys play that clip when he said that?
No.
Oh man, yeah, because the press was asking him about gas prices, and he's like, "Can't do much about that. It's all Putin's fault." But the thing that we really, I think, need to hammer on, and we can move on to some other topic after this, is that if it's a good idea to drill for federal or for oil and gas on federal land now, it was a better idea 16 months ago when the supply chain could have actually been, working out the kinks from the pandemic, right? So, the administration has done things like sick the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, saying that companies need to quantify their greenhouse gas emissions. I mean, you guys have done a great job talking about ESG and all the BS pressure that's put on companies and banks that divest from the fossil fuel industries. But, they've basically thrown every roadblock up possible. And I just love that this is an admission that everything that they've done so far has been the exact wrong thing to do. Right. And I think that's why they took so long to come around to it, frankly, because I just think that Democrats in general got so used to being able to say, oh, well, this is Donald Trump's fault, and the public just being willing to go along with that. And now that they don't have our Lord and Savior, Donald J. Trump, to kick around anymore, they actually have to find solutions to problems. But their worldview is so incompatible with reality that they actually don't know how to solve any of the problems.
Well, if Donald Trump was still in the picture, CNN Plus probably wouldn't be canceled. So,
it would be raking in all kinds of cash, right? CNN Plus people would be injecting it straight into their veins if Donald Trump was still president.
Jim, you looked like you had something to add on.
If you didn't know any better, you'd think they did this on purpose, and I think they did. I think, we stopped the global economy in order to be able to get to a great reset. Klaus Schwab has talked about this, World Economic Forum. This pandemic is our opportunity for a great reset of capitalism, of global capitalism. And so, yes, let's stop the economy. That's the only way we're ever going to be able to get this done. That's the only way we're going to go down the path of the Great Reset, is to completely stop the economy. Because if people are happy, if wealth is growing, if people are just living lives as normal, you can't fundamentally transform them. They're not interested. They're living their lives. And so for energy policy, I believe that's the case here too. Joe Biden put a stop to the great America First energy policies of the Trump administration because the radicals in his party, and himself, I guess, too, think that fossil fuels are killing the planet. They're going to kill us all. We have to stop it right now. And so he doesn't care how expensive gas is at the pump. He and his former boss, Barack Obama, his own energy secretary back then, said we should have $8-9 a gallon gas, just like in Europe. That would really start to get change around here. This is on purpose. They want you to suffer because only through completely destroying the global economy and now the energy economy in the United States can they even have an opportunity for this Fantasyland, which is a green energy economy that's right around the corner. Yeah, it might be right around the corner if you ban regular, reliable, normal energy. And that's what they're pretty much doing.
Well, there's another story here that kind of ties into this idea of maybe perhaps a return to energy sanity. And this one got some play. I've seen it a couple of times. The article that I have in the show notes, that everything we talk about linked in the show notes if you want to read it in full. This is from The Hill. Biden announces $6 billion to bail out nuclear plants at risk of closure. The article starts off, the Biden administration will put $6 billion towards saving distressed nuke power plants from closure, viewing the power source as another carbon-free alternative to fossil fuels. On Tuesday, the Department of Energy announced a new bidding process for submissions under the new Civil Nuclear Credit Program. The bidding will be open to operators of plants that would otherwise be in imminent risk of shutdown. 12 reactors have closed before their licenses expired in the last decade, which the U.S. Energy Information Administration expects will reduce U.S. nuke capacity by 10.5 gigawatts. Quote, U.S. nuclear power plants contribute more than half of carbon-free electricity, and President Biden is committing to keeping these plants active to reach our clean energy goals, said U.S. Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm. We're using every tool available to get this country powered by clean energy by 2035, and that includes prioritizing our existing nuclear fleet to allow for the continued emissions-free electricity generation and economic stability for the communities leading this important work. So let the record show that we've been saying for years now, at least on this podcast, that if you're really worried about climate change, you really think the world is coming to an end, that this is an existential threat, you better start advocating for nuclear power now, because wind and solar are not going to cut it. And everything that I've seen up until this point shows a rejection of that idea from the left. It's wind and solar or nothing. And this is the first time that I've seen something suggesting that the left might be actually open to accepting nuclear power as a potential piece of the puzzle to, solving this climate emergency or anything like that. So, Isaac, I'll go to you first. Is this a sign of them coming to their senses, or are they just doing whatever they can to help reduce energy prices before elections roll around?
So I was talking to my buddy in Michigan about this because Palisades nuclear plant is in Michigan. That might be one of the plants that receives this. And I think it's even more cynical than that. Like, if these plants close down, that means like hundreds of good jobs leave. So basically, he was like, okay, well, right now, what it seems to me is they're routing money to blue state governors to keep these plants online in order to increase their electoral chances this fall. So I don't know if this is really any sort of great rethink of the administration's position towards nuclear. I think it's important to remember that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, under Biden's appointees, revoked the permits to extend the life of the Turkey Point and Peach Bottom plants in Florida and Pennsylvania.
Why do all these plants have weird names? Why is it always like Devil's Canyon, Turkey Bottom? What is this?
It's like Mad Libs. They just like pick names, or everybody puts a noun into a hat and a fruit or a food. It's like food and noun into a hat, and they pull it out, and that's how they come up. It's in the bylaws of the NRC. Oh, okay. Yeah, so that's important. But they revoked the extension that would allow these plants to go from operating for 60 years to 90 years, 80 years. And that totally messed with the industry, because people didn't want to invest in their plants if they feel like the extension of these had already been approved by the Trump administration, mind you. So this was already a done deal, and they retroactively came back and took it away. Wow. So you're really undermining the business case for investing in nuclear if the decisions can just be arbitrarily overturned by the next administration. So maybe this is a signal that, maybe we're not as dumb as everyone thinks we are when it comes to nuclear. I kind of doubt it. And I do think it's just kind of like cynical election year. Like, well, let's save something that has good paying jobs.
Well, Chris, what do you think? Do you think that this is a potential a data point on a longer term trend of the left accepting nuclear power as an option, or do you think that this is just a blip? Because to Jim's point, this idea that, you can't radically transform society, when you have abundance and reliable energy and all of that, like you need terrible, unreliable energy as a justification to overhaul society. So like in a longer term trend, it might not work for them to accept nuclear power. What do you think?
I think that I think most of this has to do with money, and I think that nuclear energy is a older technology. There's not a boatload of money to be made, and I think that the green energy industry, especially solar and wind and all that stuff, there is so much money to be made, and so much money to be made by Democratic donors and leftists in general. So that's why they are constantly pushing for green energy investments and subsidies for this and subsidies for that. And Donnie, I think this goes back to the Obama administration, back when we were just throwing hundreds of millions of dollars for Solindra and that battery system A123. They all went belly up. The taxpayers were just fleeced again. We know that nuclear energy works. We know that it doesn't have, any carbon emissions. It makes total sense to say why aren't we, why didn't we, decades ago say let's go like the France route and let's try to get a majority of our energy coming from nuclear. But I hate to be cynical, but I think this is all about the money. There's not a ton of money to be made in that industry, but there's a whole lot of money to be made with solar power, solar panels, and all these, new green technologies that don't work, but people are making tons of money. And one last point on the thing that we talked about earlier with the gas prices. I've said this many, many times, and I firmly believe this. People like Joe Biden, Valerie Jarrett, all these people, Jennifer Granholm, John Kerry, Ron Klain, they never go to the gas station. They don't care about the price of gas. They don't care because it doesn't impact them. Nancy Pelosi's unaffected if a gallon of gas in California costs $10. She doesn't fill up her tank. She's driven around in government limousines all day long. These people don't care.
Right.
And I think that is one of the most important factors that prevents them from actually understanding the plight of the common people, whether it's prices at the pump or inflation in general. These people who make these policies are unaffected by them.
Well, it's interesting that these stories that we were just talking about, the federal land, gas and oil lease, this trying to resuscitate some nuclear power plants that were on the verge of collapse. Both of these stories came hot on the heels of a litany, a slew of stories of just bad news for renewable energy. And there's a couple of these stories that I wanted to talk about the last couple of weeks, but I just kept kicking them because of important topics that we wanted to cover. But I thought today
because
would be
I wasn't on the program.
Also that, but I thought today was an appropriate time to bring them up. So I've got a couple of here. One of them is a story about how wind turbine makers are selling their wind turbines at a loss. And the reason for this is the raw material and supply chain disruption, all of this stuff. So, to actually produce those big blades on the top of those wind turbines, the companies that are making them are selling them at a loss. That's not a sustainable. I'm no business expert, but that doesn't seem sustainable. And I'm just going to run through these and I'll open up to your
and they're made in China with coal-powered fire plants. And on Easter we were having a big debate about this, and I was trying to bring all this stuff up. All that Europe is doing is offshoring their carbon emissions, because these are being made in places like China, who don't care at all about greenhouse gas emissions.
Right. There's another thing here. This is a Blaze article titled "The Cost of Lithium, a Metal Used to Make Electric Car Batteries, is Up Nearly 500% since last year. Quote, supply is simply nowhere near enough to feed the demand surge." Take a guess what that article's about. That's literally the headline I just read to you. But it talks about how lithium and nickel and other metals that serve as key components to lithium-ion batteries used in electric vehicles are just surging in prices across the board. Surging in prices. And then the last thing that I'll bring up is this Reuters article's headline, special report. Andy, you don't have this one. Don't look for it. Special report, U.S. solar expansion stalled by rural land use protests. So this is just a story about how, different places that are identified as potential locations for wind and solar farms are being pushed back against by locals that don't want this giant eyesore, or all the myriad of reasons why they don't want this developed near them. And this story should come as no surprise for constant listeners to the show. We've discussed the concept of the vacant land myth, a term coined by Robert Bryce a ton of times on this show. Places like New York or Bernie Sanders' Vermont, residents resist plans to construct sprawling wind and solar farms. My favorite one to bring up is San Bernardino County, basically a huge desert in the bluest state in the country, faced backlash over a planned solar farm. And then we even covered a story recently about some lady that handcuffed herself to a cactus in the middle of a desert because she was afraid some solar farm was going to disrupt the habitat of the desert tortoise or something.
That's dedication.
No doubt.
I mean, if you're going to handcuff yourself to a cactus, that's the next level.
But this idea of there's not being just these vacant swaths of land just ready for development for wind and solar is so bad that it was actually referenced in the latest IPCC report, which addressed difficulties in finding suitable land for building wind and solar. So all of these stories stacked on top of each other just paints a very bleak picture for renewable energy. So bleak that I thought that is what instigated the first two stories we talked about in this segment, the expanded oil and gas drilling in federal lands and the resuscitating of nuke plants. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just too much of an optimist. Isaac,
I'm sorry, but that would signify or demonstrate there was an ability to link cause and effect.
Right. And that's just not going to happen. No.
One of our commenters here noted that China now emits Abel Windsor. China now emits 2.7 times the USA yearly carbon emissions.
Oh, good. It's gone up.
And look, Biden and the left and the environmental left, they keep talking, and the global left, the World Economic Forum and all of them, they keep talking about getting to net zero or just zero. They want a zero emissions future. Well, we probably, at the rate we're going, we'll get there. Because you'll get there one way or the other. It's kind of like, if you're falling out of an airplane, it's like, you're going to hit the ground. You'll be landing. That's inevitable now. So if you take away, this is the thing about net zero and the idea that we just have to eliminate all carbon dioxide emissions because it's ruining the planet. The United States, as noted, is doing so much better than China. We didn't enter the Paris Accord, or I should say, Trump got us out of the Paris Accord. Yet our transition to cleaner burning fossil fuel energy sources like natural gas had us reducing our tonnage of CO2 emissions into the atmosphere, beating all of our competitors who were in the Paris Climate Agreement. You're not going to get you won't get to zero by reducing CO2 emissions by converting coal plants into natural gas and then relying more for your electric grid on nuclear power. You'll be doing a lot better. But doing a lot better isn't good enough for these environmental radicals. They want us to get to net zero, and so we may end up in a situation if these radicals continue to control policy in this country, where we'll get there, we'll get close, but everybody's going to be poorer. The grid will not be reliable. There'll be rolling blackouts and brownouts as a regular part of life, like we live in some kind of third world country. So we can get to net zero, but it will be extremely painful for everybody else.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of. I can't argue with anything that you said there. In fact, there was a Stanford report. I didn't have enough time to dive into it before this podcast, but it seems to advocate for we've done a study and it shows that people are the optimal happiness level throughout the world at about a quarter of the amount of energy used by Americans. So it was almost suggesting that it's like, if we reduce the amount of energy that we use by 75%, we'll all be happier. And it's just like, okay, I feel like there's going to be some flaws in that study, but maybe we'll take that up in a future episode. Isaac, I'm going to give you kind of last word on all of this, whether you want to comment on just the litany of terrible news stories that have come out about renewable energy, or how that relates to energy sanity as our government officials see it. I'll leave it up to you.
Ooh, very open-ended way to end it. Yeah, did you guys see the article about the wind turbines killing 150 bald eagles?
Oh, that was yeah. Didn't they get sued over that?
Yeah,
some
they
company?
did. They did. But okay, so what people need to realize that the dictionary definition of energy is the ability to do work. And when you make energy less reliable or more expensive, you impede people's ability to do work, which makes them less productive. No, I'm actually having a legit conversation here with the audience, Donald.
I thought you were setting up a joke about
and
like
we
the
don't
work
have
is
enough
killing...
time for this back and forth. Okay, so please just let me finish.
I said you had last word. Go ahead.
When you do that, you are impeding the ability of the economy to function. So you make things more expensive. That's why we're seeing inflation. And in Europe, that's actually causing like fertilizer production to shut down. So we're seeing material shortages of important goods. So we need secure supplies of reliable, affordable energy. And if it happens to be better for the environment, great. If it isn't, then, the other technology needs to catch up and get there.
All right. I thought you were going to make a joke about the work that's being done is killing bats and stuff, but
I would never, Donald. When would I ever make a joke that is considered uncouth by the general public?
Good point. Good point. I don't know.
I don't think we've ever had a guest more hostile than Isaac Orr is right there in the last 5 minutes. Even people that don't like us.
All right. Cue that music, Andy. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of the In the Tank podcast. Join us every Thursday for a new episode. Like I said at the beginning of this, for those audio only listeners that are catching the show on a Friday, you can join us live on Thursdays at noon Central Time on Facebook and Rumble and YouTube and Twitter, wherever we're live streaming. You can join the conversation, leave your comments and questions. Maybe we'll respond to them on the fly. If you'd like, you can follow us on Twitter at InTheTankPod. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions for the show, feel free to email us at the InTheTankPodcast@gmail.com. Jim Lakely, where can the fine people find you?
At Jay Lakely on Twitter, at Heartland Inst on Twitter, and always go to heartland.org.
Fantastic. Chris Talgo, what do you got to pitch today?
Heartland.org and stoppingsocialism.com.
Fantastic. And Isaac Orr, where can the fine people find you?
At AmericanExperiment.org and at The Fracking Guy on Twitter and Truth Social.
That is right. Thank you all for tuning in. We will talk to you next week.